Hi, it's James Robbins, back again on the River Wye in Hereford. Since we posted our YouTube videos on stick float and waggler fishing, I've had quite a few specific questions relating to some of the detail in regard to the rigs and methods that we talked about. So I'm going to go down on the river now and take you through some of this detail. A common question that we've been asked in relation to the videos on YouTube was what rod to use when stick float and waggler fishing on rivers. Well, actually I use the same rod for both styles of fishing, and that's a Mach 3 XT rod. In the past you used to have different rods for different methods, so you'd have a splice tip for a stick float rod and a through actioned rod for waggler fishing. Well, due to advances in technology, in blank technology and design, it's now possible to achieve a rod that actually works for both styles of this fishing. So the Mach 3 XT rod has a very sensitive tip, not dissimilar to a splice tip, that bends perfectly into the middle section without any flat spots at all. You've got plenty of power in the middle and butt section for casting and playing fish. But the blank itself is very lightweight and responsive. I mean, we call the action fast, so it's stiff, but it's not too stiff. It's got a sensitive tip and through action. The one question I would have is about the length of rod to use in what situation. Typically for most of my waggler fishing I use a 13-foot rod, unless the peg's very deep or I'm casting long distances where I might consider using a 14 or a 15. For stick floats I actually like to use a longer rod, so my first choice is the 15-foot version of the Mach 3 XT. This gives me better control and better presentation when I'm stick float fishing. An important point to consider when you think about these new Mach 3 XT rods is the Fuji Alkanite guides that we use. These guides are very lightweight, they're lined so they're hard wearing, and on the middle and tip section they're actually single leg guides. So this helps to both reduce the weight of the guides and also improve the action. Okay, let's look at the reels. I had quite a few questions relating to the reels that I use when I'm float fishing. So I'll take you through some of the detail relating to the Mach 3 XT reels that I use. Now, some of you have said, what's the difference between a front and a rear drag? We actually do sell these reels in both options. For me, when I'm float fishing, I prefer a front drag reel. I prefer a front drag because it's more compact and it also enables me to have a much better drag system. I actually find now that I'm using the drag more and more, even when I'm not necessarily catching big fish. If I'm fishing with finer line and hook lengths, I like to set the drag very light, so that if I hook a fish, I've got the extra cushion of knowing that I've got a very sensitive drag system. Another feature about the Mach 3 reels, the new XT version, is that they're made from aluminium, which means that the reels are even stronger, but also more rigid. So there's no play at all in terms of the reel flexing when you're playing the fish. The reels have got a oversized line roller that again helps to improve the power of the reel during casting, playing fish, and this is a big advantage over the old reels that we used to use, including closed face reels. The Mach 3 XT reels are supplied with 3 extra aluminium spools, so that gives you great versatility in terms of having different main lines set up on different spools. The double handle on the Mach 3 XT reels is particularly useful when float fishing. That's because when you're fishing, casting and trotting, the reel always stays in the same position. The handle doesn't drop down. Now, we do supply the reels with both a single and a double handle, and again it's personal preference. I really like a double handle, and this is my option when I'm float fishing. It's fair to say that a lot of the questions we received relating to the stick float and waggler videos actually relate to the rigs used. First of all, I'm going to talk about main line. As you'll notice, it's really important to load the line right up to the lip of the spool. You don't want to overfill it, but if you underfill it, you'll not be able to cast properly with the light floats often used, and also you'll hamper presentation as you're trying to trot the float down the river. I actually favour using Berkeley's XWR line. That's a floating line. It's a high-tech line, so it's a low diameter with a fair amount of stretch, but it's very light and it floats beautifully. Again, this helps presentation as you can control the float much easier. So I like to use a light high-tech line like this, but one thing I will do is use some muslin, which is a grease, and actually will apply that about 2 feet above the line to make that section float even better. So that's a really key tip, muslin. Now moving on to the rigs, let's look at the stick float first. Some people have noticed that I use a lot of shot. So I've actually got on a 8No. stick float here, I've actually got 20 number 8s and 2 number 10s. Now some people ask, why don't you just use 2 or 3 bigger shot? Well, again, my personal preference is to use lead number 8s. I like lead number 8s because, for one, they're softer and they move up and down the line easier without damaging the line, but also they're more compact, so there's less resistance from the shot when you're casting, and also to help aid presentation. I suppose the key feature though for using more shot is the fact that the rigs become a lot more versatile. So depending on the conditions, depending on the type of peg, you can adjust the shotting pattern accordingly. So that could be to spread the shot out in a standard shotting pattern such as a shirt button style, or bring the shots down into a bulk if you want to fish with a more positive manner with the bait nearer the bottom, or if you want to get through smaller nuisance fish. So that to me is so important, using a lot of shot instead of 2 or 3 shots. When it comes to actually threading the stick float onto the reel line, you'll notice that I like to use 3 rubbers. Now this silicone rubber I like to use is very slim and strong, so it's not bulky. I don't like to have a big piece of silicone rubber because again that will impede presentation and it won't allow you to shot the float accurately. I use 3 rubbers because it gives greater support to the float and less strain on the rubbers, and I like a long section on the bottom of the stick float to prevent tangles. Moving on finally to the waggler rigs. On a waggler rig you've obviously got to have some bulk shot. In this case I've got 3 AAA shot and a BB, which makes the main bulk part of the shotting pattern, and I've also got 3 or 4 number 8s and 3 number 10s below. Now one important fact to consider is that you've got to use non-toxic shot on anything over a number 8. So in this case I'm using these very good non-toxic shot called Cushion Shot from Dinsmore. But I still have to emphasise that you don't want to be sliding these shots up and down the line too much. So when I actually change depth or move the bulk shot, I always take them off the line with my fingernail and then reapply them wherever I need to. If you're constantly moving the shot around, you've got a big danger of damaging the line. So as you can see, as with the stick float, I like to have several smaller shot to allow me to achieve different types of presentation. So if I wanted to fish shallow with the waggler, I could just have 1 or 2 number 10s down the line. But when I wanted to go deeper and fish in a more positive manner, I'd then bring the number 8s into play. You'll notice that on all my waggler rigs I use a quick change float adapter, so I can quick change the float from an insert to a thick waggler without having to break the complete shotting pattern down. And one final tip that I'd like to show you that's really neat is whenever I set my floats up, I always set up the float with all the shot that I'm going to be using, so that I can dot the float right down in the margins. If I was to take the number 10 shot off there, it would give me a little bit more visibility to the float if I wanted to fish out. But for absolute maximum presentation and sensitivity, that's the best way to load the float correctly. Okay, I hope that's answered most of your questions. I've added some rig diagrams to the end of the video that should help to explain the various shotting patterns that I tend to use when I'm waggler and stick float fishing. Please don't hesitate to drop me an email if you've got any questions in addition, and also have a look at our website to look at some of the products that I've talked about in more detail. I'm desperate to get fishing, so good luck and I hope you enjoyed the video.